Then I will call to order the Common Council meeting on June 30th at 7:32. First up is Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call, please.
Alder Radafrada.
Here.
Alder Clowder. Alder Gerhart.
Here.
Alder Krause. Alder Krause.
I think she went to the bathroom.
Okay, I believe I see her though up there, so. Alder Maldonado.
Here.
Mayor Richardson.
Here.
Alder Schrader.
Here.
Alder Strassman.
Here.
Alder Udell.
Here.
You have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. And that is Schroeder, not Schrader.
Schroeder, I'm sorry. You can read it either way, I guess.
Well, there's only one correct way, right, Sarah?
Right.
All right, next up is consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion to approve. Move.
All right, seconded. Is there anything that anyone wants to pull out of the consent agenda? All right, seeing nothing, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. I see that we have Nathan here from the school district, so if it's all right, I would like to make that the first thing we go through before we do the TID and then the business boost loan, just because I think that the school signage is going to take a very short amount of time and the TID thing is going to take a little bit longer. So if no one has any objections, I'd like to move forward to A6A1. If Tom, do you want to make a motion for that?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance. It's 2020-0-19, an ordinance amending Chapter 23 of the Smart Code relative to signage at civic zones. Move approval.
Did you want to make that? Did you want to make that motion as amended by Planning Commission? Because we did make one small change in Planning Commission.
Oh, yes, we did. Yes, include the Plan Commission amendment or change.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you, Randy. Do you want to explain this, Tom?
What this does is the school wanted a larger sign than Smart Code that we have for Smart Code, and it's roughly a monument sign. It's approximately 6 feet high, and in Plan Commission, we approved it. I think it's kind of a moot point. It's just so the school can be seen better, and sign was a little larger than we had in Smart Code, as I stated.
Yeah, and I can just add, in Smart Code, you're not supposed to have monument signs. The buildings are supposed to be up on the street. This is allowing civic uses like a school, maybe a fire station in the future, things like that, to have a monument sign up to 6 feet high. I know Nathan is on the line representing the school district. Nathan, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, thank you. No, nothing else in addition to the comments that I made in Plan Commission. I know Andy Weiland, the school district, is joining on the call as well. There is one clarification, but we'll likely direct that to city staff, just related to lighting of the sign. I don't know if any council members can speak to that this evening. Otherwise, we will direct that to city staff following our conversation.
Yeah, that'd be great. Staff can answer that for you. Andy, did you want to add anything?
No, I think we're all good.
All right. And the amendment the Plan Commission made was, it says in the Plan Commission may grant an administrative waiver for the use of a monument sign. We changed that to the administrative waiver may allow for the use of a monument sign. So letting staff just do that, it's pretty prescriptive on what they can and can't do. And just thought for convenience, for speed, that staff, unless there's a real issue with it, they can always bring it to a planning commission or council, but otherwise, staff can really just approve that because it is pretty descriptive in smart code. So trying to make things a little bit easier and quicker. And one of the reasons why we're approving this right now is because the school is getting close to done, and it needs to be done by the beginning of September. So we want to make sure that we don't put up any roadblocks for them. Is there some questions, Gabriella?
This is not directly relevant, but what is the school called? I'm actually not.
Forest Edge Elementary.
Very cool.
Other questions at all?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So this one is going to apply to civic zones.
Correct, for civic uses only.
Okay.
All right, I don't see any other comments, so I will go to a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. All right, now we'll go back to number 5, consideration possible action on a resolution approving amendment to the project plan and boundaries of the TID 13. I don't know, maybe Julia, do you want to do a motion for this?
So where we are, I move approval of resolution R-120-20 and Plan Commission Resolution PCR 04-20. A resolution to approving an amendment for the project plan and boundaries of the tax incremental district number 13, City of Fitchburg, Wisconsin.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Gabriella. And for the 4th time tonight, Greg from Ellers.
Good evening. Before I go through this particular amendment, I know there's some new council members. I know you were given some background information from staff on TIF. I didn't know if anyone wanted a quick 2-minute TIF introduction. Happy to do that, or happy just to get into the amendment, whatever your pleasure is.
I know a lot of people have heard the presentation already.
I'll take that as we'll dive into the amendment.
We're welcome to take, at any point, you can ask questions about TID in general, but
That's
yeah,
correct.
Go ahead.
So the purpose of the amendment this evening for TID number 13 is to add some additional territory to the district and to increase the eligible project costs permitted within the district. This TID district was created back in 2018 as a mixed-use district. Initially was created to help facilitate expansion at the Phoenix Company and also provide opportunities for other commercial and mixed-use development within the district. The project costs identified in the original project plan included infrastructure costs, primarily road and utility extensions, as well as some path and boardwalk improvements, and then development incentives to help facilitate development. The original project plan included $23.6 million of project costs. This amendment adds an additional $11,550,000 of project costs, primarily for environmental analysis and remediation, some geotechnical work, infrastructure improvements, and development incentives related to structured parking and other infrastructure. So the total expenditures permitted within the plan would be increased to $35.3 million. In terms of the increment valuation, the new value that's generated within the TIF district based on continued phase development within the district, that's estimated at approximately $22 million for both the amended and the original boundary of the district. In terms of the territory that's proposed to be added to the district, there's a map on page 7 of the project plan. The original parcels within the district are parcels 1 through 13. The parcels proposed to be added are parcels 14 through 30. The majority of those parcels, 14 through 30, are presently located within TID District number 4. They will now be absorbed into TID District number 13, so any new value or appreciation in value of those parcels will now go to TID 13 as opposed to TID 4. That's not anticipated to have any negative financial consequences to TID 4 because the increment value that's there presently is sufficient to handle remaining project costs, and that district is scheduled to close within a couple of years. The benefit of having these properties come into TID 13 is that it gives more time for TIF assistance to help facilitate development of these properties. Since TID number 4 is nearing the end of its expenditure period, and it's going to close within a few years, moving them over to TID 13 provides the remaining life of TID 13 to help facilitate development. And TID 13's only been in existence for 2 years, so it has a 20-year maximum life, so there's a much longer horizon to see development within those areas. There's really two primary reasons for the timing of this amendment. One is the equalized value test, which is summarized on page 13. This is a requirement under statute that says anytime you're adding territory to an existing district, the increment value of existing TIDs plus the base value of the new territory being added cannot exceed 12% of the city's total equalized value. So the current increment value of all existing TIF districts is approximately $353,140,000. The amount of the base value of the territory being added to this district is approximately $16,789,000. But as I mentioned, the majority of that is already located within TID 4, so it's included in TID 4's increment value. So the amount of new territory that's being added to this district that isn't within an existing district is only about $6,500 of value, so a very nominal amount. So we are still under the 12% test, so we can add territory to TID 13. New increment values and a new total equalized values for the city will come out preliminarily on August 1st and will be certified by the Department of Revenue on August 15th. In discussions with staff, we think it's likely that based on continued growth in existing TIF districts, that increment value may likely exceed 12% of the city's equalized value, which would eliminate the ability to add this territory without subtracting territory from another district. So we wanted to get this amendment done before that those new values are released. If the city is, over that 12% test, we call that being TIF'd out. All that means is the city would be unable to add new territory to an existing district or create a new district without either closing an existing TID or a combination of closing a TID and subtracting territory from an existing district to get under that 12% test. So it doesn't preclude you from continuing to spend money within your existing districts on permitted TID expenditures, entertaining development. It's really not, there's no financial limitation, there's no penalty. It just really restricts your ability to create or amend existing districts by adding territory. So since you're anticipating that your largest TID district is going to close in a couple of years, you'll regain a lot of that TIF capacity. And if something happens in the meantime, you could likely subtract some territory from TID 4 or TID 6 that are going to close in the near term, that you'd still leave enough value to pay remaining costs, but take the value out so you could add more territory or create a new district. So your flexibility isn't completely taken away, but it's going to become a little more limited if you do exceed that 12% threshold. On page 25 of the project plan is the listing of all the original project costs identified in the original plans, a combination of infrastructure and development incentives. All these project costs remain TID eligible. Again, it's approximately $23.6 million. We just restated them in the amendment, so it was clear that all those were still permitted expenses. On page 26 are the costs that we're adding to the TIF. Again, it's $11,750,000, $750,000 for environmental analysis and remediation, $500,000 for soil dewatering and other geotechnical work, and then $10 million of an additional development incentive allowance above and beyond what was in the original project plan for some development incentives for infrastructure, parking, underground parking, are the most, and place-making amenities are the most likely candidates for those development incentives. And then there's some intersection improvements at East Sherrill Parkway, a portion of which are TID eligible for $500,000. So the total permitted project costs between the original plan and the amendment are approximately $35.3 million. By identifying these project costs in the original plan and this amendment, it puts the TIF tool in place and makes these projects TID eligible. There's a distinction between the project being TID eligible and the project being TID feasible. By being in the plan, that means the TID can pay for it. The next question, and probably just as important, is there going to be sufficient increment to pay for it? That makes a project TID feasible. So if it's in the plan, it's permitted, increment needs to be there to ultimately make sure the TIF can pay for it. So the city has very good practices and policies in place that all projects are reviewed for but-for test compliance to make sure that the project needs TIF assistance in order to proceed. Any infrastructure project in this plan requires separate authorization by the Common Council. Any development incentives require approval of a development agreement by the Common Council. So none of this is a commitment to budget or move ahead with these projects just by approving a project plan amendment. It just makes it TID eligible. And on page 28 is a updated valuation, increment valuation projection for the TID district. We worked with staff who had conversations with developers within the area to project out potential additional value. This is really where the benefit of a TIF district comes in play from a financial standpoint. As new value is generated, the city retains all of the taxes generated by that new development. So you retain the city, the counties, the school district, and the technical college's share. So it's a partnership between the city and the other taxing jurisdictions. They're agreeing to forego their tax revenue on new development to pay for these project expenses, with the expectation that when the TID district closes, there's going to be higher increment value that goes back onto the tax rolls that all taxing jurisdictions will benefit from. So if that $222 million of new development value is materialized over the remaining life of the district, that'll generate about $63.4 million of tax revenue over the 20-year life of the district, which is summarized on page 29. Just takes your current tax rate for the TIF district and extrapolates out the tax revenue from $222 million of value. So an illustration of how the TIF district could perform is on page 30. This is the cash flow projection. So we have the increment, that's $63.4 million coming in over the 20-year life of the TIF district. The city retains a portion of that annually to make sure it has sufficient revenue to cover costs of the district, administering development agreements, evaluating projects, things of that nature. And then we show future development expenses phased in over the life of this district. The project plan gives the city the flexibility to undertake project costs either as a development incentive, or for the infrastructure it can be paid by a development incentive, or it can be financed by the city. The preferred method is that all infrastructure costs would be financed by a developer, and then those costs could be reimbursed back to the developer for that public infrastructure through the TIF district. That's commonly done through what's called a municipal revenue obligation. It's a pledge through a development agreement that the city will reimburse a specified dollar amount that can also be repaid at an interest rate that's typically negotiated in the development agreement. So the key to really any TID being successful is to match the pace of project costs and investment with the development as it materializes. It's not, the city expending costs too far in advance of that development occurring. So you want to make sure that the increment is sufficient to cover those costs before they're committed to by the Common Council. So typically this requires phasing. So this cash flow illustrates that phasing. If all the project costs were funded through a development incentive, it would be phased in over a number of years to tie back to that new value that's being generated. So this illustration, the project plan, is really just that. It's an illustration of what it would take to pay for all the project costs and close the district by 2035. Practically what happens going forward is, anytime a project comes forward, either if the city is looking at financing or you're looking at providing a development incentive, we take a much closer look at these cash flows to make sure that the increment's likely going to be sufficient to cover the project costs, and there's other guarantees put into the development agreement. So again, this is illustrative, not a commitment. I rarely make guarantees, but I will guarantee what is shown here will probably change because it's likely that that'll happen over the 18-year life of a TIF district. But this just kind of illustrates, the type of analysis and review that'll need to be done before the city agrees to these project costs. So where we're at in the TIF amendment process, there's been several steps preceding this meeting. Tonight, there's an initial meeting of the Joint Review Board, which consists of the other taxing jurisdictions and a public member. They had an organizational meeting. There was a required public hearing before the Plan Commission. They recommended approval through adoption of a separate resolution, and now it's Common Council consideration. There's a resolution on your agenda as well. If you decide to proceed with the amendment for adding territory and increasing the project costs, it'll go back to the Joint Review Board. They have the final say. That meeting, if this is approved this evening, would occur on July 21st. And that would be the final step in terms of the meeting requirements. Then the amendment submitted to the DOR for certification. That'll occur after October of this year. So that's what kind of the purpose and the background of the amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. It's the fourth time you've had to go through that tonight. Misty, before I get to any questions, comments, do you have anything you want to add?
No, one thing I'd like to reiterate, though, is Greg's point about how this is really just the outline of what is available, and that we would still go through that pro forma and but for review before a reward would actually be made.
Pat, anything that you want to add?
Just quickly, Mayor, then, as I mentioned at the other meetings, is the impetus for this TID amendment was a development project on the corner of East Sherrill and Cyene. There's a site there, the Gerlach property. It's lots 26 and 27. Actually, I'm sorry, is that 26 or 36? 26 and 27. 26 is actually owned by Avante, 27 by the Gerlach currently. That site is contaminated. There is a developer that has an option on that property to redevelop the entire site into a commercial opportunity that would benefit the neighborhood. We thought since there was this opportunity prior to August 1st to amend TID 13, that we would do so, and we would include some other properties that wouldn't, that would give us the opportunity for what we see as potential growth in the next 2 to 5 years. It would give us the opportunity to fund those projects with some assistance. So that's it.
And I'll just add that we can't publicly say what that company is yet. It's
Right.
not 100%, but Pat or Mike can tell you outside of this meeting, or myself. You just ask them. They
Right.
can tell you. But for now, it needs to be confidential.
That's correct. And we just need to keep that to ourselves at this point in time.
Questions, comments? I know a lot of people have talked about this in other meetings already. Gabriella?
I was wondering,
Yeah, can I make a comment?
Sure.
Yeah, we discussed this in SIDA, and also we approve it, and we approve it in finance. So what I want to mention is that we should vote in favor of this expansion of this tax incremental district. This is something that the city has been proactive now to maybe to attract more economic development in that area of the city. The area is, the current tax incremental district is a mixed-use district. And so this one is gonna this expansion will open the doors to bring maybe more of the amenities, retail that the area needs. So, so I think this is something good for the area.
All right, I've got Gabriella next, and then Dorothy after that.
I was wondering if Mike or Pat could speak to, just for people that are watching council and haven't watched the other meetings, the types of developments that might come over the next 18 years. So my understanding is that some of that development incentive fees will help pay for the parking structures for a grocery store. And then we're also looking potentially at a health care facility and then an expansion of the biotech or the tech company. So if you could just give a picture for what that might look like over the next 18 years.
Yeah, currently there's a large healthcare, locally owned healthcare corporation that owns a large percentage of Uptown just to the east of this amended TID district. We see that development taking place, probably a parking structure in that proximity. We also see additional commercial opportunities in the newly amended TID area here to the east of the railroad tracks and north of East Sherrill and west of Lacey. We see that being as a major commercial area for Uptown. And then to the north of that, which isn't in this TID, we see a lot of single-family opportunities, single-family homes being developed similar to Uptown Crossing along Cyene, which would occur on the east side of the tracks in close proximity to Uptown Crossing. So there's a lot of opportunity. As I mentioned in Plan Commission and Finance, I believe, given the urban footprint requirements of smart code development, a lot of these parcels are very tight. The building requirements are with little setbacks. Surface parking's discouraged. That's why things like structured parking and infrastructure improvements are fundable in terms of incentives.
And do we have any concept of how long it will take to have a grocery store? Or we have no idea at this point.
I'd like to say we'll be done next year with all this development, but Mike's been dragging his feet. No, Mike does a great job.
Yeah.
No one can tell. I mean, no one expected what hit this year
Yeah.
with COVID. No one expected, 2007, 8 to happen. But this area is primed for development, especially with Terra Vesa going up across Highway 14 there on the east side. You're going to see a lot of households pop up. So I think that eventually, as Mike says, as soon as the rooftops start hitting the right number, we'll see the commercial development.
Great, thank you.
Dorothy, go ahead.
Thank you. Back to the equalized value test page is page 13. Question that I had during all the previous meetings this afternoon that I was watching was whether the value added by the town annexation and other development that's going to be coming in the next couple of years is a factor in all of this or not.
Yes, in terms of what the 12% is applied towards, it's towards the total equalized value of the city. So that's all property within the city. So anything within the corporate limits of the city's boundaries will be, that value is subject to that 12% test.
So that would not count the town properties that we do not currently have, but will be getting in a year or two?
Yes, they do not count now because it's not within the corporate limits of the city, but if, that becomes part of the corporate limits and boundary of the city, then that value will count at that time.
Okay, cool. And the thing that I wanted to say about single-family housing that Pat just mentioned, the possibility of we need more smaller lot single-family housing. So hopefully that's the direction that we can encourage developments everywhere to go. I agree, single-family housing, but these third of an acre lots are, we've got way too many of those, and those are unaffordable for the vast majority of people. We need more affordable housing, which means quarter acre or smaller lots. Thank you.
All right.
I have a question, Aaron.
Yeah, go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
Okay, following what Dorothy mentioned that I forgot to mention in finances. So in 2022, so we are gonna we are gonna have the rest of the property from the town. So that one is gonna increase our equalized value. So it means that maybe in 2023, if we need to, it's another opportunity come and we need to open or create another tax incremental district, we are gonna have the flexibility because we are gonna have that extra valuation.
And that's when we're also planning to close the TID. So we're going to have that, it looks like $215 million right now. So those two things combined are going to give us a lot of capacity at that point in time. Gabrielle.
This is more of a general TID question, but I think I know the answer, but I just was hoping to get it on the record for council. So some of the TIDs that are going to close in the near future, the tentative plan right now, and maybe this is for Misty, is that we might leave those open for a slightly longer period of time and put that into affordable housing fund. Is that true for like a future plan for TIDs?
If I may, Aaron.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, so there is an option right now under statute where we could keep a TID open extra for 1 year, and then that fund or that money would go to the affordable housing. At this point, we do intend to do that for TID 4 and TID 6, but it will require council approval by resolution when the time comes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right. Seeing nothing else then, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. Thank you, Greg.
Thanks, Greg.
It's a long day. All right. Next up, Julia, do you want to do the motion for this?
I will ask Gabriela to do it.
All right. Caught her by surprise.
Do you want? Okay.
Motion to-
Okay, I can do it. If you-
Motion to approve Resolution R 12420, amending the guidelines for the Forward Fitchburg Biz Boost Loan Program.
All right. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second by Julia. And did Finance and CETA approve?
Yes.
All right.
But we have recommendations.
All right. Do you want Mike to talk about this, or do you want to say something first?
I want Mike. Is Mike there?
He is.
I'm here.
Okay, Mike can explain some of the recommendations. So.
All right. Go ahead, Mike.
Thanks again, Council, for your authorization previously to establish the Biz Boost program to help our small businesses reopening from the COVID crisis per the Forward Dane reopening plan there. We had 7 applicants. 2 were funded, Soho Noodles and Heritage Catering. And then the other 5 either exceeded the revenue, were part of a common business ownership that we couldn't kind of pull out and just look at the Fitchburg location. And then, excuse me, 1 had opened after the January 1st date. So based on how the guidelines were written, the underwriting committee, which consists of Finance Director Misty Dodge, Godwin Amagashi, a banker and finance entrepreneurial person, and then Dan Hardy, an attorney, they didn't feel that they could look at those applications with the guidelines as currently written. And then since we funded 2, we obviously have remaining capacity of the $150,000 that was originally moved over as part of the budget amendment. And so CETA, as part of their recommendations, I'll kind of take you through some of those and then maybe chime in what finance kind of recommended as well, was to keep an open rolling application where we would go with the 15th of each month through December 15th. So there would be additional monthly rounds of applications, and then the underwriting loan committee would meet on an as-needed basis or until funds were exhausted to consider those loan applications. One of the other questions that came up was, would we consider, in the beginning, we didn't include businesses that were franchises, but there was discussion about would we consider franchises that were locally owned but not corporate-owned stores. And some examples might be Dairy Queen. You could have the UPS store, or even our Lego store, a resale shop at Hatchery Hill is actually a franchise there with bricks and minifigs. So see it, and I think finance concurred that we'd be willing to look at kind of those locally owned franchises that aren't corporate stores. One of the other areas got into the whole discussion about common ownership within employee identification number, and this gets into some of those applications that the committee deemed weren't eligible based on how the guidelines were written. We had a couple where they had a Fitchburg location, but they were part of that common ownership and employee identification number, and the committee didn't feel that they had the authority to necessarily look at an application from just a Fitchburg location based on how the guidelines were written there. So CETA actually wanted to get clarification or some guidance from finance and council on that topic in particular, and that's why you see a lot of yellow language and red line there that kind of highlights that question. And I think where finance kind of settled down on it was that they might be open to considering common ownership for a Fitchburg location under a larger EIN number there. Then the last bullet line on the first page just talked about the date. We had one particular business that opened after January 1st. It's a second location of an already existing Fitchburg business. And so this language would allow them to be considered, as well as if you concur with the change above for the common ownership and looking at a Fitchburg location that was part of a larger EIN, we could probably then revisit that particular application as well. Then we get into the revenue amount. When we originally drafted the guidelines, we had started out, and of course we're kind of drafting these by committee and getting input from various committees as well as our partner at the Fitchburg Chamber Visitor Business Bureau. And we had kind of started out at 10 to 15 employees with $1 million in revenue, and then based on some recommendation and feedback that they had gotten, we increased the employment to 25, but we kept the $1 million in revenue there. They probably don't necessarily align perfectly that way. I shared with the Finance Committee that we did have one company that had inquired that was at 25 employees, but they were at 2.5 million in revenue, so they didn't submit an application at all because they exceeded that revenue amount. So I think we're still maybe looking for some guidance here. Finance, I think, came up with a novel approach, and that would be for the next two rounds, which would be July 15th and August 15th, that we would consider applications, again, with 25 employees up to $1 million in revenue. We'll see what comes in these next two rounds, because there was a lot going on even during the date of our application cycle. There was another round of the WEDC, we're all in small business grants. There was still money available through the Dane County Buy Local, Dane County funded small business grant. And we think also as businesses, let's say, progress to phases 2, right now we're still at phase 2, there may be things that they learn and things that they experience that result in them saying, hey, we need to do something and we could use some working capital to do X, Y, Z as part of the forward Dane reopening to not only protecting their safety and health of their customers, but also their employees and their workforce, too. So I think that was one kind of proposed change from finance that kind of addressed the revenue, with then the idea in August or after August 15th that there still was remaining capacity there, that they were comfortable maybe authorizing staff, probably finance and economic development staff in consultation with administration, to look at increasing that revenue amount up to $2.5 million if there's still funds and capacity available. Hopefully I captured kind of the essence of what I heard from finance, and hopefully, Julia, that aligns with CETA as well.
All right, so I'm going to I think I got them all down here to recap. First thing that I'm hearing for recommendation is to let people keep applying through the end of the year. Once a month, we'll review. Yeah. Seems like a pretty easy one to me, but that's just my thought. The other is to allow locally owned franchises like a UPS store, Dairy Queen, where someone locally owns it, but it is a franchise, and we didn't allow franchises before. Also, common ownership, if someone owns more than one business, that we would consider that. I think the issue is sometimes they have two businesses, and separately they would fall under the guidelines, but not when you look at it all collectively. And then the next one is the $1 million in revenue, where we keep that for the next 2 months, and then maybe have the capability to go up to $2.5 million going forward. Again, all dependent on funds still being available. There's not new funds or anything like that, but I believe those are I got all the suggestions anyway.
And then the one other one is just the date, that if they open after January 1st, that upon satisfactory financial documentation and they met the other guidelines in the program, that we would be willing to take a look at their application.
Okay. All right. Questions?
Can I,
Julia,
can
go
I
ahead.
add something that I forgot to mention in finance?
Yep.
For the, for the locally owned franchises, some of them, they have a different legal name, they are under an LLC with a different legal name and doing business as a UPS. So the intention is that we use the legal name, okay, when we make public loans, okay?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it doesn't say that UPS got this. It's whatever, it could be Mike Zimmerman LLC.
Yeah.
It's about perception.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Other comments, thoughts at all?
No, I think it's a
Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
idea. Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to continue the funds while they're available and extend it to make sure that as many businesses can take advantage of the opportunity, I guess. But I'm unfamiliar, and I apologize. Are franchises owned by individuals? Is that a common? Do we encounter that a lot within Fitchburg? And I just.
Yes, it's pretty common, Sarah. You can buy like a McDonald's franchises, Starbucks, you can do that.
And it is, okay, I just didn't know if that was something that was kind of commonplace in Fitchburg or how that worked out.
You can buy Little Caesar franchise, Domino Pizza franchises, yeah.
Mike, would you like to add to that?
Sure, yeah, things like Smoothie King is a franchise, Anytime Fitness are franchises and everything. So we have quite a few, around the city that are locally owned entrepreneurs and not corporate stores.
Thank you.
All right. Any other comments at all? Tom?
Mike, just refresh my memory. Where did this money come from? I'm thinking about the small business loan that's out there that took place. There's millions of dollars in that. There's small business loan. The banks, I know, are really working hard on that. And just refresh my memory. How much is in this account? Where did the money come from? And I just don't remember.
Sure, yeah, if you want the way back history.
Short version.
Okay, originally it was capitalized through tax increment district number 3, which is over by the Oak Bank and originally the Fitchburg Business Park and the Sub-Zero property in the initial formation there. And it was a grant from the city to CETA via tax increment district number 3 for $375,000 at that time. That was in the late 90s there. That program has been in existence, and then in the early 2000s, we moved over $200,000 of that original $375,000 into a program through the Madison Development Corporation called the Venture Debt Equity Program, and that was geared specifically for science and tech companies. So we kind of split out $200,000 for that, and then kept now it's about $186,000 in the local revolving loan fund that CETA allocates and administers. What we had requested and what the council authorized for this Biz Boost program was a budget amendment, working with the finance department, to move 150 of that 186 that's in the local revolving loan fund that CETA administers into this program. So it was part of that original 375, but right now we've budgeted 150 specifically for this purpose, for the Biz Boost with the COVID, to help businesses with the reopening there. So there's still about $36,000 in our traditional local revolving loan fund, and then there's 200 and some thousand that's administered with our partners at the Madison Development Corporation, specifically for science and tech companies.
How did, just from your explanation, some of that's coming back to me, but how did we get by with putting this fund money out there, putting this out there, whatever, from TIF? Was it part of the TIF?
Yeah.
Was it part of the TIF? I don't recall ever, maybe this is something new, I just don't recall, Misty, with TIF money in a bank like this, I'll just use that example, in a bank like this, and I need an explanation on that.
I can kind of give you the history. Back in the day, again, late 90s, we had regular requests of was there any assistance that Fitchburg could provide small businesses and companies. So I went to Mike Harrigan, who was our financial advisor at that time. Greg is has taken his place. Mike's retired, and said, Mike, is there anything that we can come up with to put into our toolkit, because Fitchburg never qualified for the traditional sources of funds to capitalize a program like this, which is the Community Development Block Grant Program, because this predated the days before Dane County became an entitlement county, okay? So when we would go and try and attract capital to fund a program like this, when we were in the statewide pool, the response we always got back was, Fitchburg, you're a wealthy community. We didn't score well compared to other communities around the state of Wisconsin that had a lot higher distress scores than we did. So that's when I went to Mike and I said, we really could use something in our toolkit here. And he said, here, Mike, here's the way to do it. You could capitalize it as you put it in the project plan, just like you reviewed tonight, as a project cost. It came out of the development incentive bucket there, and it was a grant from the city to CETA through the TID district. So the funds were originally capitalized by new valuation and increment in the TID district, not from general revenue purpose funds at that time. And that's how we originally came up with the initial 375 to establish the program. So it is something that's an eligible, expense to a development incentive line item. Quite frankly, it's something maybe through the years we should look to add to, the program as we look at future TID districts. I'm just excited right now about the, hopefully if the council concurs in 2022 to keep TIDs 4 and 6 open for the Affordable Housing Fund. Because again, this is just my editorial comment. Fitchburg is dealing with some challenges and issues, but we don't always have the toolkit that other communities that are dealing with those challenges and issues and opportunities that you normally get, where you get an automatic allocation of money from the federal government. So we always have to come up with a creative way to get some resources to address some of those challenges and issues, and also those opportunities. But there's sometimes extra steps in the process to get us there, and it sometimes takes longer to get us there.
All right. I did want to clarify, Gabriella, the motion that you made, did it include all of these changes?
I did not say that, but yes.
That was the intent?
Can I say that the intent was to include all of those amendments that you listed?
All right. I think, Julie, you were the second. Are you okay with all those changes? Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we're on the same page that the amendment, or the motion, has these changes to it. So it's as amended, I guess. All right.
Yes.
I don't see any other comments right now. So seeing nothing else, I will ask for a vote. All in favor of approving with those changes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed, nay. All right, that is approved. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, everybody, and we'll clean up the document and send them out to you so you can see the final version, because if you know of businesses or constituents in your district that are small business owners, please share the document with them and let them know that we've extended the deadline for applications. That would be appreciated.
All right. I have one announcement on here just for Misty, since she's on the line right now. I know amendments to the CIP are coming up soon, the deadline for that. please, for Misty's sake, don't wait until the last second to give those to her. She would appreciate that. And it also will always help you if you talk to her before you submit them, just because there usually is one or two things that you might want to fix and not have correct. So work with her early and often, and the sooner you get to her, the better, just for her sanity. Otherwise, next committee of the whole is July 22nd, and next common council meeting is July 28th. And that's all I have. So if there's a motion to adjourn, we can do that.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 And opposed, nay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good 4th.